Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. Following the powerful magnitude 7.7 earthquake that struck Myanmar, thousands of residents were killed, and among those affected were our very own overseas Filipino workers. The Iglesia ni Cristo quickly responded to the crisis, extending much-needed aid to our kababayans in distress.
Sa lahat po ng namumuno ng Iglesia ni Cristo, kami po bilang representante ng mga Pilipino na galing sa Mandalay, kami po ay lugod na nagpapasalamat. Maraming salamat po. At hindi niyo po kami pinababayaan.
A stark warning from the World Trade Organization, the US-China trade war is pushing the two economies towards a virtual decoupling.
We project that global merchandise trade volumes will decline by 0.2% in 2025, nearly 3 percentage points below the level we would have expected.
From steam engines to self-driving cars, the New York International Auto Show has seen it all. And this year, the show celebrates its 125th anniversary, showcasing the latest in automotive technology. And the news starts now. Following the powerful magnitude 7.7 earthquake that struck Myanmar, thousands of residents were killed, and among those affected were our very own overseas Filipino workers. The Iglesia ni Cristo quickly responded to the crisis, extending much-needed aid to our kababayans in distress. Take a look. Last March 28, a devastating 7.7 magnitude earthquake rocked Myanmar, with tremors felt as far as Thailand. The massive quake brought widespread destruction, toppling buildings, collapsing bridges, and cracking roads across the country. Among the hardest hit areas was Mandalay, Myanmar's second-largest city and home to over 1.7 million people, including a number of Filipino migrant workers. Many of them are Filipino teachers who have lost their jobs and to this day remain unpaid due to the economic challenges now facing Myanmar. In response, the Iglesia ni Cristo launched its humanitarian mission, Dalhingap sa Mamamayan or Care for Humanity, through the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation. The outreach was held in Yangon at the Best Western Green Hill Hotel. But before the aid was distributed, the INC coordinated with the Philippine Embassy in Myanmar, led by Chargé d'Affaires Angelito A. Nayan. Under the leadership of INC Executive Minister Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, the relief mission was supervised by District Supervising Minister Brother Alan Gomez, along with Ministers Brother Adriel Magpile and Brother Jerome Emor Bunye.
Sa lahat po ng namumuno ng Iglesia ni Cristo, kami po bilang representante ng mga Pilipino na galing sa Mandalay, kami po ay lugod na nagpapasalamat sa pagtulong niyo po sa amin. Lalo na ngayong nakaranas kami ng hindi inaasahan at saka traumatic na experience. So, 10 po ng mga kasamahan ko na taga Mandalay, mga Pilipino na taga Mandalay, kami po ay taus-pusong nagpapasalamat sa Iglesia po ni Cristo. Maraming salamat po at hindi niyo po kami pinababayaan.
This act of compassion is just one of many being carried out by the Iglesia ni Cristo across the world, fulfilling the biblical command to help those in need no matter where they are.
Maraming salamat po, kapatid na Eduardo V. Manalo.
A stark warning from the World Trade Organization, the US-China trade war is pushing the two economies towards a virtual decoupling. The WTO has significantly lowered its global trade forecast, citing US tariffs and their potential to trigger the largest slump since the COVID crisis.
The World Trade Organization slashed its forecast for global merchandise trade from solid growth to a decline on Wednesday. It said US tariffs and spillover effects could lead to the heaviest slump since the height of the COVID pandemic. WTO's Director General, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
We project that global merchandise trade volumes will decline by 0.2% in 2025, nearly 3 percentage points below the level we would have expected without recent trade policy shifts.
The WTO said its new estimate was based on measures in place at the start of this week. US President Donald Trump imposed extra duties on steel and car imports, as well as more sweeping global tariffs. That was before unexpectedly pausing higher duties on a dozen economies. His trade war with China has also intensified, with tit-for-tat exchanges pushing levies on each other's imports beyond 100%.
We currently estimate that merchandise trade between the two economies will fall by 81%, a drop that would have reached 91% without recent exemptions for products such as smartphones. So without the smartphones, 91%, with that exemption, 81%. And this level of a drop in US-China trade of the magnitudes we are talking about is virtually tantamount to a decoupling of the two economies.
The WTO chief added that this trade disruption could increase Chinese merchandise exports across all regions outside North America by between 4% and 9%. And other countries would have opportunities to fill the gap in the US in sectors like textiles and clothing. The WTO said the services trade, though not subject to tariffs, would also take a hit.
Services trade, while not directly subject to tariffs, is also expected to be adversely affected. Declines in goods trade will reduce demand for related services such as transport and logistics, while broader economic uncertainty is expected to dampen demand for travel and investment-related services. As a result, the volume of global services trade, and I should stress it's the volume, not the value, is now forecast to grow by 4.0% in 2025 and 4.1% in 2026, well below the baseline projections of 5.1% and 4.8%.
China is pushing back against what it calls extreme pressure from the U.S., urging Washington to ease up and come back to the table for trade talks.
China's Ministry of Commerce has maintained normal communication with its counterparts in the United States at the working level. China's position has always been clear, and it is open to consultations with the United States in the economic and trade fields. The unilateral tariff increase was entirely initiated by the United States, and the party who initiates it must resolve it. We urge the United States to immediately stop extreme pressure, coercion, and blackmail, and resolve differences with China through equal dialogue on the basis of mutual respect.
President Trump is claiming big progress in trade talks with Japan, but the negotiations are proving to be complex and potentially contentious. The president met with the Japanese delegation in Washington, marking one of the first round of direct talks since his administration's global tariff push. However, the meeting took Japan by surprise. Take a look.
U.S. President Donald Trump touted big progress in tariff talks with Japan on Wednesday, after one of the first face-to-face negotiations since he imposed sweeping global duties earlier this month, most of which he later paused for 90 days. Japan had not expected the president to get involved in Wednesday's talks, which it had been hoping to limit to trade and investment matters. But when Trump announced his involvement early in the day, he said the discussion agenda included the amount Japan pays towards hosting U.S. troops. Afterwards, Trump said on social media that meeting the Japanese delegation had been a, quote, great honor, and that big progress had been made without giving details. Opposite Trump in the meeting was Ryosei Akazawa, a close confidant of Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. He spoke to reporters after the talks.
Meetings with Japan are a priority. When Trump says that there are 70 or 100 countries in line, there's no way the president can attend all of them, so the talks with Japan are a priority. I think his presence is a clear sign of that.
Ishiba sounded a more cautious tone speaking to reporters later in Tokyo, saying that negotiations going forward, quote, will not be easy. Trump earlier this month blasted Japan for what he said was a 700% tariff on rice, a figure Tokyo disputes. Levies on autos are particularly painful for Japan, as cars make up nearly a third of the country's shipments to the U.S., its biggest export market. Trump's involvement is a potential sign he wants to keep tight control over negotiations with dozens of countries expected over coming days and weeks. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni heads to the White House on Thursday to discuss tariffs imposed on the European Union with Trump. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has invited South Korea's finance minister to Washington for talks next week.
A powerful combination of trade uncertainty and central bank buying has sent gold prices soaring to record highs. China's continued gold reserve accumulation is a key factor, along with the weakening of the US dollar.
Gold touched fresh record highs on Thursday. Prices for the precious metal hit just over $3,357 per ounce before easing back a little. Demand is sky high as traders seek out a refuge from the turbulence on stock markets sparked by global trade tensions. Independent analyst Ross Norman told Reuters that the gains are a warning bell, indicating that investors are recalibrating their outlook. Prices have also been supported by buying by central banks, with China adding to its gold reserves for a fifth straight month in March. Since it's priced in dollars, bullion is further helped by the tumbling value of the greenback, which makes it cheaper for investors holding other currencies. Gold is traditionally seen as a refuge in times of turmoil. Over the first quarter of this year, more than $21 billion has flowed into exchange-traded funds featuring the metal. That's the biggest inflow since the start of 2022, when markets were reacting to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The gains are causing chaos for some of the world's biggest gold fans. Indians buy huge amounts of the precious metal, often as jewellery for weddings. Traders there say the rising prices have seen demand all but evaporate, with people having to trade in their old items to buy new pieces when there is a marriage in the family.
Chip giant TSMC has reported a massive surge in profits, but the company's future outlook is still clouded by the ongoing trade tensions with the United States. TSMC, the world's leading contract chip maker, announced a 60% jump in quarterly profit today, beating analysts' expectations. This growth is largely attributed to the booming demand for advanced chips used in artificial intelligence. President Trump's unpredictable trade policies, including threats on tariffs on semiconductors, are creating significant uncertainty for the entire chip industry, and particularly for TSMC. The company counts major tech players like Apple and Nvidia among its customers. Just last month, TSMC announced a massive $100 billion investment in the U.S., alongside President Trump at the White House. This in addition to the $65 billion they've already pledged for 3 chip plants in Arizona, with one already operational. While TSMC's profits are soaring, the company, like the rest of the industry, is closely monitoring the evolving trade landscape and the potential impact of U.S. policies. The Trump administration pressure on Harvard University has escalated dramatically, with the Department of Homeland Security now threatening to revoke the university's ability to enroll foreign students. Now, this comes on top of threats to strip its tax-exempt status and the termination of millions in DHS grants, all tied to Harvard's refusal to comply with demands to overhaul its academic programs.
U.S. President Donald Trump is keeping the pressure on Harvard University after it rejected his demands to overhaul academic programs or lose federal grants. In a social media post Wednesday, Trump wrote Harvard is a joke and should no longer be considered even a decent place of learning. A day earlier, he threatened to strip the university of its tax-exempt status and said it should apologize after Harvard called his demands unlawful.
First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students. There were professors who said that he had engaged in discriminatory behavior against Jewish students. Of course, you had the former president of the university saying bullying and harassment depends on the context. You also had an encampment on Harvard Yard that we all saw play out before the cameras. The university failed to impose formal discipline on any students for this anti-Semitic conduct violations, including the occupation of a campus building and the disruption of classes with bullhorns.
Veena Dubal, a law professor at the University of California Irvine Law School and the general counsel of the American Association of University Professors, said the move could be a watershed moment.
Everyone was looking to see who would be the first universities to stand up to the Trump administration, and I'm really, really heartened that it is Harvard, one of the nation's oldest institutions, certainly one of the most well endowed, with a lot of frankly political connections. I mean, this could be a game changer in terms of saving the sector.
Beginning with Columbia University, the Trump administration has rebuked universities across the country over their handling of the pro-Palestinian student protest movement that roiled campuses last year, following the 2023 Hamas-led attack inside Israel and the subsequent Israeli attacks on Gaza. Some professors and students have said the protests are being unfairly conflated with anti-Semitism as a pretext for an unconstitutional attack on academic freedoms.
This is not just about pro-Palestine speech, and I really want to get that across here. This is people who do gender research, people who do research on race, people who do research about uterine fibroids, anything that kind of broadly can be seen as conceived as somehow woke or relating to diversity. I think those people are feeling an extraordinary chill, and certainly I feel it myself.
Harvard President Alan Garber, in a letter on Monday, said the Trump administration's demands, including an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, were unprecedented assertions of power unmoored from the law that violated constitutional free speech and the Civil Rights Act.
Europe is eyeing a potential brain drain from the United States as budget cuts force American scientists to seek employment abroad. The administration's funding reductions are impacting researchers at top institutions, and European leaders are actively recruiting, hoping to capitalize on the US's loss.
Marine scientist David Dia-Dihan began working at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, in October. By mid-February, he had been dismissed. Dihan and hundreds of others were affected by job cuts, targeting probationary workers as President Donald Trump's administration began slashing funding for universities and research bodies. He's now applying for jobs in Europe.
It is likely that the opportunities for me and others to find another job that will use our skills in the U.S. are going to be few.
Trump's administration says billions of dollars in cuts are needed to curb the federal deficit and bring the U.S. debt under control. Dihan says he will go wherever there are opportunities, even if there is a high cost.
I'm going to probably lose my connection to my daughter who lives here in Florida. I do it because I'm passionate about science, about the marine environment. I will move overseas.
The threat to academics' livelihoods at universities including Yale, Columbia, and Johns Hopkins has given Europe's political leaders hope they could reap an intellectual windfall. A letter reviewed by Reuters, signed in March by 13 European countries, urged the EU Commission to move fast to attract academic talent. And the European Research Council told Reuters it would double the relocation budget for funding researchers moving to the EU. 13 European universities and research institutes that spoke to Reuters reported seeing an increase in U.S.-based employees and academics considering a move. But pulling in U.S. talent requires more than goodwill. For decades, Europe has lagged far behind the U.S. on investment of higher learning. Total expenditure on research and development in the EU in 2023 was more than $400 billion, according to Eurostat. That same year, U.S. spending was $940 billion, according to the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics. A White House official said even with the cuts, the U.S. would still account for most of the world's research funding, and dozens of scientists have taken to social media, encouraging peers to stay in the U.S. Michael Olesen, an epidemiologist based in Washington, D.C., said language barriers were one potential drawback.
Really, the hurdles are just
finding work, figuring out how to do that transition and moving. I'd probably sell most everything I have and just start fresh.
Olesen said any brain drain of US-based scientists wouldn't necessarily have a short-term impact, but future generations would be affected.
The long-term implications, though, with losing some of the thought leaders in the sciences is that you also lose the educators, and you need that classroom setting a lot of times to learn how to do science properly.
Meanwhile, a U.S. senator's attempt to visit a wrongly deported man in El Salvador has been blocked, escalating tensions between the two nations. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen arrived in El Salvador Wednesday, seeking to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran man mistakenly deported and now held in a notorious prison. However, El Salvadorian authorities denied him access. Why was he denied access? According to Senator Van Hollen, Vice President Felix Oloa stated he couldn't authorize the visit and also claimed El Salvador is holding Abrego Garcia because the U.S. is paying for his incarceration.
The Trump administration is clearly in violation of American court orders, and his mother and his brother and their family, because he has 3 children. Some of them have severe disabilities. I promised them that I would do everything I could to get him out of CICA.
The White House has responded sharply with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt accusing Van Hollen of using taxpayer dollars to demand the release of a deported illegal alien, MS-13 terrorists.
The Democrats and the media in this room have continually and wrongly labeled Kilmar Abrego Garcia as a Maryland father. There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Abrego Garcia was also arrested with 2 other well-known members of the vicious MS-13 gang. And 2 separate judges found that Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13, and that finding has never been disputed.
But hasn't the U.S. acknowledged a mistake in this case? Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has directed the Trump administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return after admitting he was deported due to an administrative error.
That still leaves the question, why is the government of El Salvador continuing to imprison a man where they have no evidence he's committed any crime and they've not been provided any evidence from the United States that he's committed a crime? They should let him go, and we will find a way to get him from San Salvador to Maryland, the state of Maryland.
However, President Trump, during a meeting with El Salvador's President Bukele, said he had no plans to return him.
The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you could release him inside El Salvador?
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
The Department of Homeland Security also claims it lacks the authority to bring him back. Adding to the controversy, Abrego Garcia's lawyers maintain he fled El Salvador at 16 to escape gang-related violence. He was granted a protective order in 2019 to continue living in the U.S. and has never been charged with or convicted of any crime.
President Trump and our Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Vice President of the United States are lying when they say that Abrego Garcia has been charged with a crime or is part of MS-13. That is a lie.
Along with Abrego Garcia, the Trump administration has deported hundreds of people, mostly Venezuelans, whom it says are gang members, to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, without presenting evidence and without a trial.
This contempt proceeding will not resolve the broader questions posed by the Trump administration's invocation, blatantly illegal, I should say, invocation of the Alien Enemies Act to deport summarily a whole group of people alleged to be members of a Venezuelan gang that nobody ever heard of until President Trump invoked this statute. This statute was designed for wartime. When we are at war, the statute gives the president the power to detain or deport nationals of the country with which we are at war. We are not at war with Venezuela, and therefore the statute does not apply. If the administration feels that it can ignore court orders and ignore constitutional requirements, that they provide people an opportunity to be heard, an opportunity to defend themselves before they are spirited off to another country, then why couldn't the president do that to citizens? And in fact, reports are that he has said that he wants he has ordered his lawyers to determine whether he can send U.S. citizens off to serve time in foreign prisons. Plainly illegal.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. Harrowing video has been released showing two Florida law enforcement officers narrowly escaping a high-speed collision. Take a look. The Volusia Sheriff's Office released footage of a near-fatal incident that occurred Sunday on a local interstate. A sergeant and a highway trooper were responding to an accident involving a car and a deer when they were almost struck by a speeding SUV. The dramatic footage shows the officers jumping out of the way just moments before the SUV slammed into their patrol vehicle. The SUV then continued crashing into the original car involved in the deer collision before finally coming to a stop on the highway. The Volusia Sheriff's Office described the incident as a split second away from tragedy in a social media post.
You okay?
Are you guys okay?
Yeah, almost not okay.
Oh my God.
You okay? Well, we have rescue coming now.
Yeah, I just think I got whiplash.
Fortunately, neither officer sustained serious injuries. Authorities are now investigating the cause of the SUV crash. From steam engines to self-driving cars, the New York International Auto Show has seen it all. And this year, the show celebrates its 125th anniversary, showcasing the latest in automotive technology. But as the industry changes, the show's legacy remains a testament to the enduring fascination with the automobile.
It's the 125th anniversary of the New York International Auto Show. The New York Auto Show really got things started for the auto industry back in 1900 at the old Madison Square Garden. We had 69 different vehicle manufacturers represented in that first show, which is more manufacturers than we actually have today. But since that beginning of that time, back in November of 1900, set off this kind of annual exhibition of motor vehicles. First motor vehicles were steam, they were electric, and they were gas. So obviously gas prevailed for decades and decades and decades on it, but it's interesting to see where the genesis of the industry came about. Most of the manufacturing was also right here in the New York area. Queens, Brooklyn, Connecticut is really where the industry really got its start. But when it comes to the show, it's just continued to grow over the years, and now we hold 1 million square feet of space, hundreds of new cars that are displayed, and we're expecting hundreds of thousands of people that come through the show to take a look at all the new product that's available and start thinking about the next car purchase. Electrification is still somewhat new, or connectivity. self-driving. Obviously, there's lots of things that are going on. But the show has just about something for everybody. And that's the beauty of the show. If you're into hyper cars or sports cars, performance vehicles, you know, that's there. If you're looking for SUVs, family fun vehicles. I think the auto industry has really gone about taking a look at the customer base that's out there and really has evolved into offering products that everybody's looking for.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.